FTMKickstart, how's it going? How's it going? I apologize for being out of the picture, if you will, for so many weeks. This idea that is held by certain groups of people, but also I'm sure individual people consider it, trans men transitioning into the role of man to escape female oppression and gain male privilege. And it's a little tricky because I see it as a myth, but with elements of truth. So, but I guess every myth has elements of truth. I don't know what I'm saying. So, to start off, I will describe the truth that I see in it, and then continue to explain why it shouldn't be viewed as sort of like an all-encompassing fact about trans men. Trans men that I've watched on YouTube have mentioned that there is a shift in behavior towards them from when they're perceived as female to when they're perceived as male. One guy I used to watch a lot, Les, he really struggled to come to terms with the fact that he was trans because he had spent his entire life fighting the patriarchy and being a feminist and standing up for women's rights, and he felt like transitioning would be a betrayal because of this idea that you're just taking the easy way out, because it is hard to be a woman in our society. I mean, you just have to do a minute bit of research and you start to see there is that concern that people will start to treat you differently. Maybe there is an element of giving you more respect. I know some guys have said when they were perceived as female, people didn't really believe that they were competent in anything they were trying to do. So, right? So there are differences, and it's unfortunate in a way. I mean, in some ways it's okay, but we as a society have to talk about that. You know, we have to converse and not just assume things and figure out what is good and what is inappropriate to expect from each gender. So there's the truth within the myth that perceptions do change, but the myth is most trans men. Well, I can't say that. I can't quantify that at all. From my experience, you're not transitioning to gain anything. You're transitioning to become comfortable in your body, which, once again, I guess is gaining comfort. But it's all semantics. Sorry, I'm a little rusty. It's been a while. Ha. Okay. Right, it's a very much a mental disconnect from your body, and it's really hard to be inside this body. And I was watching a documentary, and I can't remember what it's called now. If I remember, I'll put it down in the thing. But I think it was Judith Butler. They were interviewing her, like she was one of the guests, and I think it was her. And she was talking about how women in general are sort of taught to hate their bodies. Is that right? You know, like, guys are learning about sex at a young age, but women are sort of protected from sex and protected from exploring their bodies, and so their bodies become these like foreign things, and you know, everything's kind of demonized about the sexual parts of their bodies, which is what I struggle with, you know, like my chest and like downstairs, that discomfort and that unease. And she was saying that that is fairly typical for all women, and it's about owning it and like discovering yourself and learning about yourself and loving yourself. If the majority of women, because transsexuals, and well, transsexuals, I'll just stick there, it's a fairly small percentage of the population. If the majority of women can sort of surpass that or cope with it, you know, why can't trans people? What's different about my experience? And then you hear some girls say, you know, they feel like a woman, they feel like a girl, they feel comfortable in their body. You know, lesbians maybe struggle with ideas of gender and thinking that they should have been men, and then kind of realizing that they're okay with being women and they're proud. And it's not that I wasn't proud to be a woman, it's that I wasn't. You know? You know you don't. Unless you do know, then you know. But if you don't know, you can never know. So that's why it's really tricky. So, the myth of trans men transitioning to gain male privilege, my opinion is it's predominantly radical feminist, even a little step down from radical feminist, but a predominantly feminist agenda pushing forward this idea of betrayal in light of women's rights and the fight for women's rights, and looking at people who are born into women's bodies, who have a female shell, who don't feel female on the inside. But how can you make someone understand that? You know, all we have is our language, and our language is completely limited. You know, we can only use the words that we're given. And how do you create new words? You have to get people using them in a certain context, and you lose control, you know? So, where was I? So radical feminists fighting for women's rights, seeing trans people shedding their female bodies, and automatically thinking that it's like a masking, hiding your femininity because it's too hard to cope with being a woman in our society, or like shame of being a woman. You know, all these things. There's so many betrayal, envy of men and their power and the penis and all that stuff. And these are all just tools that people use of fear. I mean, fear is always a big driving force in humanity, isn't it? It's also a very emotional thing. We've made gender a very emotional thing because you've attached life to it, even though life is attached to biological sex and biological reproduction. We sort of intertwined gender into that, and so it becomes very emotional when you're talking about creating life and death and all that stuff. That's my take on it. There are shifts that happen when you transition and you start to pass as a man, but I think it's up to each individual to take whatever they're given from this transition. So whatever your experience, whatever good, whatever bad comes from it, whatever social status you achieve through transition, I think for the most part, trans men who are out, I am confident in saying that they are very aware of what's going on within our society, maybe even what's going on around the world. very conscious people and very open-minded, striving to not add to the patriarchy and to not put women down. Take care of yourselves. Be good to yourselves, be good to other people, but only those who deserve it. Really, not everyone deserves your kindness. I'm just saying. Alright.